In this video, I'll be going over the second third of A5. So this section is on solving quadratics. There are 4 different methods that we're going to go over. So the first one is solving quadratics by factoring. First, you want to factor out the GCF if possible. Factor using the X method or special products that were talked about in A3. And then set each factor equal to 0 and solve. In this first example, there's going to be 2 methods. So either you recognize right away that this is a perfect square trinomial, and we'll factor into 2x plus 3 squared. Or if you don't realize that right away, you can use the X method. So on the top would be a times c. For this problem, that'll be 36. On the bottom is going to be the b value, which is 12. So we're looking for 2 numbers that multiply to 36 and add to 12, and that would be 6 and 6. On the top would be 4x. So both of these will simplify to 2x over 3, which becomes the factor 2x plus 3. Okay, so we have 2x plus 3 times 2x plus 3 equals 0. And since they're both the same, we can just set one of these factors, 2x plus 3, equal to 0. Then to solve, we're going to subtract 3 on both sides. We get 2x equals negative 3, divide by 2. So x equals negative 3 over 2. In number 8, first we want to factor out a negative because we want a to be positive. So this will be x squared plus 10x plus 16 equals 0. And then to get rid of that negative, we can just divide both sides by negative 1. So we get x squared plus 10x plus 16 equals 0. Then we can use the x method. So on the top would be 16, on the bottom is 10. We're looking for 2 numbers that multiply to 16 and add to 10, and that'll be 8 and 2. We have x on top. So then we get x plus 8 times x plus 2 equals 0. So we have 2 factors here, and we're going to set each one equal to 0. So then we get x equals negative 8 and x equals negative 2. And these will be our 2 answers. The next method is using square roots. So first you want to isolate the variable or terms being squared. Square root both sides of the equation, simplify the radical if possible, split into 2 equations if it's a rational number, and solve for x. So in number 9, the x is what is being squared, so we're going to divide by 9 on both sides first. We get x squared equals 4, and then to get rid of the squared, we're going to square root both sides, so we get x equals plus or minus 2. So anytime you square root both sides of the equation, you'll always have the plus or minus, so make sure to include that. In number 10, the 3x plus 9 is what is being squared, and it's already isolated, so we're going to go ahead and square root both sides. 24 breaks up into 8 and 3. 8 breaks up into 4 and 2, and 4 breaks up into 2 and 2. So there's going to be a pair of 2's that come out of the square root, and the 3 and the 2 don't have pairs, so those are going to stay on the inside. So we're left with 3x plus 9 is equal to plus or minus 2 rad 6. So the 2 and the 3, these 2 here, that were not able to be taken out of the square root because it didn't have a pair, we're just going to multiply and keep on the inside. Then to solve for x, we're going to subtract 9 on both sides. So we get 3x equals negative 9 plus or minus 2 rad 6, and then divide by 3. So we get x equals negative 9 plus or minus 2 rad 6 over 3. And then we can see if we can simplify anything. We're going to be looking at the number in the front, the number in front of the radical, and the denominator. So -9, 2, and 3 don't have anything we can divide every number by, so we can leave this as our final answer. For this next one, x minus 4 is what is being squared, so we're first going to add 18 to both sides. So we get 7 times x minus 4 squared equals 28. Then to get the x minus 4 squared by itself, we're going to divide both sides by 7. So we get x minus 4 squared equals 4. And then we're going to square root both sides. So square root of 4 is going to equal plus or minus 2. And then here's where you'll want to split this into two equations. So x minus 4 equals 2 and x minus 4 equals -2. Then to solve for x, we're going to add 4 in both equations. So we get x equals 6 and x equals 2. And in this next one, we want to isolate x plus 3 squared. So first we're going to add 7 to both sides. So we get -3 times x plus 3 squared equals -24. Then we're going to divide by -3. So we get x plus 3 squared equals 8. And then we want to square root both sides. So 8 breaks up into 4 and 2, and 4 breaks up into 2 and 2. So there are a pair of 2's that will come out and a 2 that's left over. So we have x plus 3 is equal to plus or minus 2 rad 2. Then to solve for x, we're going to subtract 3 on both sides. So x equals -3 plus or minus 2 rad 2. In the next section, we're going to solve by completing the square. So we want to first rewrite the equation as ax squared plus bx equals the constant. So all the x's on one side and the number on the other side. And we can only complete the square if a is 1, so we want to factor out the a value if needed. Then we want to find the c value that we want to add to both sides, and then factor using perfect square trinomials, and then solve using square roots. So in number 13, the first step is to move the 14 over to the other side. So we have x squared plus 8x equals 14. So we're going to add a number here. And to figure out what that number is, we're going to use b over 2 squared. So in this problem, b is 8. 8 over 2 squared is 4 squared, which is 16. So we're adding 16 to both sides of the equation. And we have to add it to both to keep the equation balanced. So now this part here is a perfect square trinomial. And this will factor into x plus 4 squared. This number, the 4, or the plus 4, is always going to match the number before we squared in the equation solving for c. So x plus 4 squared is going to equal 30, since 14 plus 16 is 30. And then to solve, we're going to square root both sides. Let's see if 30 can be simplified. 30 would break up into 10 and 13. 10 would break up into 5 and 2. And there are no pairs, so that means we can keep it as square root of 30. So x plus 4 is going to equal plus or minus square root of 30. And then to solve for x, we're going to subtract 4 on both sides. So x equals -4 plus or minus square root of 30. In number 14, we want to add 3 to both sides first. So we have x squared plus 6x. Then we're going to add a number here. It's going to equal 3, and we're going to add a number here as well. So again, we're going to use b over 2 squared. In this problem, b is 6. So we get 3 squared, which is 9. So we're going to add 9 to both sides of the equation. x squared plus 6x plus 9 is going to factor into x plus 3 squared, since 3 is the number that we squared when we were looking for the c value, and that's going to equal 3 plus 9, which is 12. Next, to solve for x, we're going to square root both sides. So 12 breaks up into 4 and 3, and 4 breaks up into 2 and 2. So there's a pair of 2's that can come out and a 3 left on the inside. So we have x plus 3 equals plus or minus 2 rad 3. And then to solve for x, we're going to, subtract 3. Not 2, sorry. Subtract 3. So x equals negative 3 plus or minus 2 rad 3. Okay, for this next problem, I'm going to move the x's to the right-hand side just so it's even. So I'm going to add 2x squared and subtract 4x on both sides. And I'm just going to rewrite it with the x squareds on the left. So this would be 2x squared minus 4x equals 14. Since we have an a value, this 2, in this problem, we want to factor that out first. So we have x squared minus 7x equals 14. And I'm just leaving a blank because that's where we're going to add our c value. Okay, so to find our c value, that'll be negative 7. Oops, sorry, not negative 7. Negative 2. So negative 2 over 2 squared. So that'll equal negative 1 squared, which is equal to 1. So we're adding 1 on the left, but since we factored out this 2, we would have to distribute it back into the problem. So what we're really adding is a 2. So we want to multiply the c value, so this number, by whatever we factored out. So 2 times 1 is 2, and that's what we're going to add on the other side. So we still have this 2 on the outside. X squared minus 2x plus 1 is going to factor into x minus 1 squared, and that'll equal 16. So negative 1 was the number before we squared it, so that's why this number is negative 1. Next, to solve, we're going to divide both sides by 2. So we get x minus 1 squared equals 8. Square root both sides. 8 breaks up into 4 and 2. 4 breaks up into 2 and 2, so we have a pair of 2's. So x minus 1 equals plus or minus 2 rad 2. Add 1 to both sides, and we get x equals 1 plus or minus 2 rad 2. Okay, number 16. We already have all the x's on one side and the constant on the other, so we don't have to do anything there. But a is 2 in this problem, so we want to factor that out first. So we have x squared plus 8x, and then plus our c value. It's going to equal negative 12 plus the c value. So in this problem, b is 8. So we have 8 over 2 squared, which is 4 squared, which is 16. So we're adding 16 on the left side of the equation, but since we factored out that 2 times 16 is 32. So that's what we're going to add on the other side. So we have 2 times x plus 4 squared. So again, this 4 was because of this 4 here, and this will equal 20. Then we're going to divide both sides by 2. And we get x plus 4 squared equals 10. And then we're going to square root both sides. 10 breaks up into 5 and 2, and both of those are prime, and there are no pairs, so we can leave this as square root of 10. So x plus 4 is going to equal plus or minus square root of 10. Subtract 4 on both sides, so x equals negative 4 plus or minus square root of 10. Okay, and the last method is using the quadratic formula. So here's the quadratic formula. First, your equation has to be written as ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. So you want everything on one side and 0 on the other. And the equation is x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c over 2 times a. So in this first problem, number 17, we have this in the right form because it equals 0 and everything is on the left. So we can find the a, b, and c values. A is going to equal 3, b is equal, we have to first rewrite this in standard form. So x squared plus 3x minus 1 equals 0. Okay, so a is going to equal 1, b is equal to 3, and c is equal to negative 1. Then we're just going to plug this into the quadratic formula. So x is going to equal negative 3 plus or minus the square root of 3 squared minus 4 times 1 times negative 1 over 2 times 1. So that'll be negative 3 plus or minus square root of 9 plus 4 over 2. So that'll be negative 3 plus or minus square root of 13 over 2. And the square, or 13 is a prime number, so we can't simplify the square root of 13. So we can leave this as our final answer. Okay, and this last one. So we want to move the 6x over to the left, and we want to write it in the middle so that it's in standard form. So I have 9x squared minus 6x minus 37 equals 0. We can't factor anything out, so we're just going to use these numbers as our a, b, and c. So a is going to equal 9, b is going to equal negative 6, and c is equal to negative 37. Next, we're going to plug this into the quadratic formula. So x is going to equal negative 6 plus or minus the square root of negative 6 squared plus 4 times 9 times, minus 4 times 9 times negative 37 over 2 times 9. Then we're going to simplify, so that'll be 6 plus or minus square root of 36 plus 1332 over 18. So that'll be the square root of 1368. And we can simplify or break up 1368 into 36 and 38. 36 breaks up into 6 and 6, so we have a pair of 6's. And 38 breaks up into 2 and 19, and both of those are prime. So those will stay inside the square root. And don't worry, I won't give you a number this big on your quiz or test. Okay, so we have 6 plus or minus 6 rad 38 over 18. And now we're going to see if we can simplify. So we're looking at these three numbers. All of them are divisible by 6. So this will be 1 plus or minus square root of 38 over 3.